She went in for a routine procedure. She woke up unable to have children, and no one asked her permission. In 2019, a 29-year-old woman named Pauline Benam walked into a medical facility seeking help for menstrual irregularities. She was being held at the Irwin County Detention Center in Georgia, an immigration detention facility tucked away from public scrutiny. Doctors told her she had an ovarian cyst. Minor procedure, nothing to worry about. She trusted them. When Pauline opened her eyes after surgery, her world had been permanently altered. What she was told would be a small operation had become a full hysterectomy. One of her fallopian tubes, gone. Her future, as she had imagined it, gone. She sat in her wheelchair, motionless, sobbing, unable to form words for what had just been taken from her. She was 29 years old. But here's what they didn't tell you. Pauline wasn't alone. Deep inside the walls of the Irwin County Detention Center, something systematic was happening. A nurse named Dawn Wooten had seen enough. She became a whistleblower, stepping forward to expose a doctor operating inside the facility. A man detainees had quietly begun calling the Uterus collector. His name was Dr. Mahendra Amin. According to Wooten's testimony, Amin performed unauthorized medical procedures on detainees, repeatedly, and without their informed consent, with a particular pattern of targeting Black and Spanish-speaking women. This was not an accident. This was not negligence. This was a system, and it did not begin in 2019. If you believe these stories deserve to be told, subscribe to Hidden Black Files and hit the bell. History tried to bury this. We're digging it back up. To understand how we got here, we have to go back far back to the end of the 19th century, when a dangerous idea began to take root in American scientific and political circles. It was called eugenics. Dressed in the language of science, eugenics claimed that human society could be improved by controlling who was allowed to reproduce. Its followers, respected doctors, lawmakers, Ivy League academics, argued that intelligence, morality, and even criminality were hereditary, that certain people simply shouldn't have children, and they had the power to act on it. The movement found fertile soil in a nation already saturated with racial hierarchy. It gave racists a laboratory coat to hide behind. It gave bigotry a clinical name. And it would devastate generations of Black women. Before we go further, if you're learning something from this video, take a moment to support the channel. It costs nothing to subscribe, and it means everything for keeping these stories alive. Hit the subscribe button right now. We'll be right here when you get back. One of the architects of this horror is a man still celebrated in some medical circles today. James Marion Sims, often called the father of modern gynecology. Sims was born in South Carolina and found his way into medicine young. But he struggled with formal training and left school before completing clinical education. What he lacked in credentials, he made up for in access to enslaved Black women on southern plantations. Plantation owners hired Sims to conduct medical examinations on enslaved women. Their concern wasn't the women's health. It was their reproductive capacity, their value as property. Sims used them as test subjects. He developed his surgical techniques by operating on enslaved women, repeatedly, without consent, and without anesthesia. He held the belief, as many white physicians of his era did, that Black people felt less pain than white people. A lie, not a medical finding. A justification for cruelty dressed as science. One patient named Lucy nearly died from sepsis after one of his surgeries. She endured the procedure in front of 12 white male physicians, restrained while she screamed. Sims was celebrated. Lucy was never named in his published work. His legacy is built on her suffering, and the suffering of countless women whose names history never recorded. By the early 20th century, the eugenics movement had moved from the lab into the law. Across 32 states, over 60,000 Americans were forcibly sterilized. And the movement didn't stay in America. It crossed the Atlantic. Madison Grant, an American eugenicist, published a book called The Passing of the Great Race. Adolf Hitler called it his Bible. American eugenicists actively collaborated with Nazi scientists, contributing to the ideological foundations of what would become the Holocaust. Let that land for a moment. The ideology behind American forced sterilization programs helped inspire the genocide of millions. Back home, state legislators were moving fast. In Mississippi, lawmakers introduced sterilization bills targeting what they called, in their own words, the black tide which threatens to engulf us. Black women were labeled feeble-minded and promiscuous. Their bodies became legal battlegrounds. In 1964, the year before the Voting Rights Act, Mississippi proposed a law making it a felony to have children outside of marriage. The choice given to those who violated it: prison or sterilization. Representative Walter Meek justified this by claiming the state was subsidizing illegitimacy. His words about black mothers on welfare were cold, calculated, and deeply dehumanizing. In North Carolina, Senator Wilbur Jolly stood before an audience of black constituents, pointed his finger at them, and declared, "One of every 4 of your race born in North Carolina is illegitimate." He then introduced a bill to sterilize the women he was pointing at. This was not ancient history. This was 1957. 1959. Living memory. Behind every statistic was a name, a face, a life. Fannie Lou Hamer was born in 1917 in Montgomery County, Mississippi, the youngest of 20 children born to sharecroppers. She left school at 12 to pick cotton. She knew poverty, and she knew hardship, but nothing could prepare her for what happened in 1961. Hamer went to a hospital to have a small uterine tumor removed. A routine procedure. She was never asked about anything beyond that. The white doctor performing the surgery gave her a full hysterectomy without her knowledge, without her consent. The practice was so common in the South it had its own name, the Mississippi appendectomy. She woke up unable to bear children. No one told her what they had done until she discovered it herself. But here's what they didn't count on. They didn't break her. Instead, they built her. In 1962, Fannie Lou Hamer became an organizer for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. She led 17 volunteers to register to vote in Indianola, Mississippi, a direct act of civil defiance. She lost her job the same day. Her family's property was seized. She was beaten in jail, threatened, surveilled. She kept going. Her voice became one of the most powerful in the civil rights movement. She testified before the Democratic National Convention in 1964, and her words were so raw, so devastating, that President Lyndon B. Johnson called an emergency press conference to pull cameras away from her testimony. The system had tried to silence Fannie Lou Hamer by taking her womb. Instead, it created a force that could not be stopped. But her story was not the only one. In Montgomery, Alabama, 1973, a mother named Minnie Ralph brought her daughters to a family planning clinic. Minnie Lee was 12. Mary Alice was 14. Their mother was illiterate. She signed a form she was told authorized birth control shots for her girls. She had unknowingly signed consent forms for their permanent sterilization. When the truth came out, it sent shockwaves through the nation. The subsequent legal battle uncovered that between 100,000 and 150,000 poor Americans were being sterilized annually under federally funded programs. Doctors were telling women explicitly that their welfare benefits would be cut if they refused the procedure. A 12-year-old girl, permanently sterilized, without understanding what was happening to her. This is not medieval history. This is 1973. The reach of these programs extended well beyond the mainland. In Puerto Rico, a United States territory, the government ran a mass sterilization campaign known as La Operación. Women were told the procedure was reversible, that it was medically necessary, that it was simply part of family planning. By 1960, approximately one-third of all Puerto Rican women had undergone tubal ligation, many without fully understanding it was permanent. Even women who left the island weren't safe. Esperanza, a Puerto Rican woman living in Hartford, Connecticut, was steered toward sterilization when she went to her doctor asking about birth control. She was told the procedure was temporary, that the tie would simply come undone after 5 years. It wouldn't. It never would. And she didn't find out until it was too late. In California, Latina women were sterilized at rates 59% higher than non-Latinas. Medical records from the period show doctors casually labeling Latina patients as, quote, sex delinquents. Politicians spoke openly about Mexican immigrants as an undesirable type, their children dismissively called anchor babies. The eugenics vocabulary had changed. The mission had not, and it wasn't just Black and Latina women being targeted. In the 1960s and 70s, up to 25% of Native American women were sterilized, often without their consent, through the Indian Health Service, the very agency tasked with protecting their health. The tactics ranged from deception to economic coercion. Many women only learned what had been done to them years later. Colonialism had simply found a new instrument, the operating table. Here's what's most chilling about all of this. It didn't stop. In 2017, less than a decade ago, a Tennessee judge was offering reduced jail sentences to inmates who volunteered for sterilization. The same logic, the same coercion, a different century. And in 2019, Pauline Benam woke up in a detention center in Georgia, unable to understand why her body had been violated without her permission. The line from James Marion Sims to Mahendra Amin is not a coincidence. It is a continuum, a pattern that has never fully been interrupted, only driven underground, repackaged, and redeployed against the most vulnerable. Reproductive justice is not just about the right to end a pregnancy. It is the right to have children, the right not to have children, the right to raise children in safety and dignity. For Black women and women of color in America, that right has been systematically denied, through law, through medicine, through policy, and through silence. Organizations like the National Women's Health Network fought back in the 1970s, pushing for federal sterilization guidelines including mandatory waiting periods and informed consent. These were hard-won protections. But protections are only as strong as the institutions meant to enforce them, and history shows those institutions have often been the perpetrators. The deeper problem is this. Most people have never heard these names. Fannie Lou Hamer, Lucy, Minnie Lee Ralph, Esperanza, Pauline Benam. Their stories exist at the edges of history textbooks, footnotes, if they appear at all. That silence is not accidental. It is chosen, and every time we choose to remember, to say their names, to tell their stories, we push back against it. If this video opened your eyes to history you were never taught, that's exactly why Hidden Black Files exists. Subscribe to the channel, share this video with someone who needs to see it. Leave a comment below. Tell us what part of this history hit you hardest, and what you think needs to change. These are not just old stories. They are warnings, and they are still being written. Subscribe to Hidden Black Files. Be part of keeping this history alive.